Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and today, folks, I'd like to welcome a special guest here as we discuss the upcoming game this Sunday at Heinz Field between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Tennessee Titans. So joining me is Davey Hudson, executive producer of 3 and Out, Fox Sports Knoxville, and WKGN 1340 105.7 in Knoxville, as well as the BLEAV in Titans podcast. Davey, I'm out of breath now. How are you doing, how are you doing today, and how are things going?
Hey, Joe, I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on here today. Looking forward to this upcoming matchup between the Titans and the Steelers. Whenever you look at what both these two teams or Steelers trying to get in. I mean, they still have a chance to win the AFC North, how that division is shaken up. And the Titans, of course, trying to maintain their lead over the Colts and also still in contention for one overall seed in the AFC. They currently are sitting there with the Patriots due on the tiebreaker after that win a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and first of all, I'll say Davey and I have had some technical difficulties trying to get the show going here, so any apologies if it's a little rough here or there. Otherwise, he would be joining me on video here with a nice little backdrop. What is that, Nissan Stadium there in Nashville? So, by the way, Davey, Knoxville, absolutely love it. What a great town. But Hoping you guys enjoy Pittsburgh, but not too much as you come to Heinz Field. You were just mentioning we've done this a few times here and had to reboot, so try and make sure we cover all the bases. We've got some injury reports to go through, and we've got some different sides of the ball to tackle as well. First of all, it seems like the Steelers and the Titans are kind of linked together in certain ways. Mike Tomlin mentioned this in his Tuesday press conference. Very familiar for being non-division opponents, seems like. They're playing each other fairly frequently, and that's because they always tend to be in similar playoff kind of seeding. Now, right now, it doesn't seem that way because the Titans got off to a huge head start, particularly with Derrick Henry, King Henry, running over everyone. But right now, he's injured. He could be back for a playoff run potentially with you guys. But sitting pretty right now, 9-4 at the top of the AFC South. But it seems like whenever it's the Steelers or the Titans, they're anywhere within being at least above 500, whether it's a couple of games, 9 wins, 10 wins, wild cards. If one doesn't make it, the other does, or both do. So these teams are usually pretty equally matched. So I'd like to kick this off. And, of course, you know a lot more about the Titans than I do. Let's talk about the Tennessee offense with Ryan Tannehill. And also there's some players that are in, some players that are out, some movement there at wide receiver. So I'd like to hear your insights on what us Steelers fans and even the Steelers defense has to look out for from the Titans offense.
I think if you really are just trying to prepare yourself for what you're going to out of what Minnesota tried to do whenever they were running the ball early and often against the Steelers last Thursday. The Titans, with a ground attack, and I mean, they want to make sure that they establish that first and foremost. I know Derrick Henry has been out, but they've been somewhat consistent in getting that going, adding Dontrell Hilliard and Deontay Foreman. I know they tried Adrian Peterson out there after Henry first went out. That didn't work out, and so now they've kind of got these two backs with Ryan Tannehill. He had an incredible season last year. I know a lot of people, whenever it comes to not in a major market, so they don't get as much as the fanfare, but Ryan Tannehill was having a 5 type season last year whenever it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL. When you strictly look at the numbers he was able to do, it has not been the case this year. He's really struggled, and so it's one in which I don't think Titans, when you also look at the weapons that he currently has around him, want to make sure that he's having to drop back. I mean, if you're having to see him constantly drop back and throw the ball, that's a very good sign for Steelers, and they're probably going to come out on top. The Titans want to, like I started this off with, start by establishing the run. If they can do that, I think they can have success because, one, they've also not been well in pass protection for Ryan Tannehill. I know TJ Watt, it's looking like he's going to be able to go I mean, if he is, they can line him up one-on-one with David Quesenberry, and that's a matchup TJ Watt's going to win at the time.
Yeah, and that is of concern. Just a brief mention here already of the injury reports. Just on the Steelers' end of things, it doesn't look like there's any movement on Joe Hayden whatsoever with the foot. He was a DMP on Wednesday. No update as of yet, as of this recording. But if he doesn't get out there, at least limited, he will probably be replaced by Ahkello Witherspoon, who had quite the game last Thursday against the Vikings. Has actually linked up 2 good games now after finally getting on the field for the first time when the Seattle Seahawks traded him at the beginning of the season to the Steelers. Another of note, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, both of the edge rushers, end up with limited practice designation. So you got to hope the groin injury that knocked TJ out of that Vikings game for most of that game doesn't come back to haunt him. This has been something that the Steelers have been struggling with all year when it comes to injuries on that front, and that's kind of skewed some of the defense. I think that's hurt some of the cohesion. And the Titans, of course, they're still solid at running the football. You did mention Ryan Tannehill and kind of having the off season, and that was something I wanted to bring up or ask you about, because only 7 interceptions last year to 33 touchdowns, and he's only sitting here with 14 touchdowns, 4 games to go, playing additional games this year as well with the new expanded 17-game season. 13 interceptions this year, only to the 14 touchdowns. A little rough. How much does that weigh in on maybe not having? I know A.J. Brown has been banged up most of the season, might not be available this weekend, keeping an eye on, well, maybe or may not be available, but now Julio Jones, the other wide receiver that was brought in from the Falcons to kind of help offset that, maybe even get rid of some of that double coverage that Brown might be facing. Now it just seems like that the Titans have been stuck in a position where they don't have both of these guys on the field at the same time. Does that kind of hurt Tannehill's season so far?
Very much so. When you look at Ryan Tannehill, while there seems like there's at least one throw a game where he just makes it and no one has an idea as to why he made that pass, and they can really put them in some disadvantageous situations. Ryan is not having the weapons that he needs. Whenever you go back and you kind of look earlier in the season, or at least having some success, and with A.J. Brown out there, Ryan looked a lot more comfortable. He knew our guy that I can trust. He just doesn't have that right now. The Titans have been trying to get the tight end more involved, but I mean, Marcus Johnson, we thought he might be able to provide something during the offseason. He spent majority of he had one breakout game. That was it. They brought in Josh Reynolds from the Rams, and he was he's a guy that wasn't looking to block, and so Mike Vrabel and his staff, if you're not willing to block, he's not going to wide receiver. And so we've been having to play guys such as Nick Westbrook, Ikene, Cody Hollister, and if you don't know those names, you're not alone. It's the reason that Titans have really struggled as far as getting anything going in the passing game, and so they'll try to use some tight ends, some action there, use the running back out of the passing game. Jeremy McNichols will be back. Some last week they didn't really have to use him because it was the Jags, and we've all seen how that experiment is this season. But yeah, the Titans have had to get really crafty with what they're wanting to do in the passing game, just the lack of weapons that they have.
Yeah, and you know what? That was one of the things we actually talked about, I guess we would say off air now, as we tried to get some of this going. The Jaguars, a whole other dumpster fire of their own with what's going on just recently in firing first-year head coach Urban Meyer. And Davey, I'm an Ohio State guy, so it's kind of like, oh boy, you know what I mean? Like we've seen some things with Urban Meyer in the past, so it's like I don't care to touch that. But the Jaguars seem to cure all the ailments there. That was a nice home game and a 20-0 victory, and you're able to control. It's a nice game because we've seen the Steelers do the same. The Jaguars have not been very successful over the last few years, so when you get a game like that, you could also. You don't get banged up. Usually you don't lose players to injury and things of that nature, whereas Steelers play on the short week with the Vikings. We've already mentioned TJ Watt, mentioned Alex Highsmith with the quadriceps injury, and just kind of I was hoping to get out of that one on the short week and on the road there relatively healthy, have the kind of mini bye to get things straight and then go back home and hopefully reset. But anything's but a given in the NFL. Right now the Steelers are listed as a +1, a 1-point favorite at home, and over and under of 43. There's a lot of fans that are sitting here in the Steel City that don't feel necessarily overconfident or very confident at all about their playoff chances. This is one that I think they absolutely must have, and there's been a few must-haves where they just haven't come out and played. The Chargers and the Titans, or not the Titans, I'm sorry, the Vikings. Those games, both on the road, they don't show up until the fourth quarter. If they get another slow start like this, I get concerned about what their offense got to get going. And go right ahead.
I was going to say, man, look at it. It was the tale of two halves for the Steelers versus the Vikings. I know your fans know that. If you go back to the Titans when they played Pittsburgh in Nashville last year, Titans didn't come out in the first half, and it just was too much for the second half. So it's definitely, I've seen these two teams really be the two halves, and it's just, what are you going to get? I mean, when you're looking at this game right now, I expect offense to be something that you see a whole lot of as far as like explosive plays. Both teams are going to try to make sure that they grind it out, and I personally think first team to 20 is probably going to come in this one.
Yeah, that sounds like such a stretch too when it comes to the Steelers. Our fan base is definitely used to the numbers here. Pittsburgh right now is sitting at 20.9 points scored per game, a little skewed with the shootouts and come from behind. They've struggled to get to 20, whereas that's good for 21st in the league, whereas the Titans are 15th and averaging about 4 points more per game with 24.9, but also giving up about 22-3. That's actually fewer than what the Steelers have been giving up as of late, also 24.8. So there's a couple of things that are kind of in favor here maybe for the Titans. It's really rough to sit here in my chair and try and see what the Steelers offense can provide against the Titans defense. I know there's a lot of people that have some questions. You've got some former Steelers here that are on the defense that I want to ask about as well. So I'm not sure where to exactly start. I think Bud Dupree's finally getting acclimated, getting warmed up to come back from IR. I got to ask about him first of all. How'd you feel about that acquisition offseason versus where it's been right now?
In the offseason, it was one of those things to where I'm always a little hesitant coming off of an ACL injury. It's just something that you're like, well, can they be that same player? And we've been out there. He's been very productive, and I've liked it. I'm a little concerned just with the amount of money that and the injury issues that you have there, because Harold Landry, who's playing opposite of him, has been playing lights out. And it's like, well, some of that money that Bud Dupree has hurt their chances of being able to give enough for Harold whenever he hits free agency this coming off season. But once he's been out there, one of the things that the Titans have been great at, not something we saw at all last year. You look at what they did last year, they were not able to generate a pass. Been able to get to the quarterback consistently just using four guys, and that is a unit that's been really great recently. Now, will Bud Dupree be out there? He did practice in full today, so it looks as though there's a really good chance he gets activated and is eligible to play on Sunday. But Harold Landry, Autry, Jeffrey Simmons, and Bud Dupree, when they've been out there, like the one game that they really were showing up was the Rams game, and you had a primetime game on Sunday night for that one where the nation got to see, but able to do that pretty consistently throughout the season. And so it's been a great surprise for the Titans. When Bud's out there, it's something that where defensive coordinator Shane Bowen is making sure he's sending him at the quarterback. And if you look at how Pittsburgh offensive line good with their ability to get to Big Ben now, is that something to where look at creating some turnovers that could be a really big factor in the game. And I do think the team over battle is probably going to come out on top as well in this one.
Yeah, and I was kind of waiting to not mention just Bud Dupree, but also Ola Adonai, who came over from the Steelers. He was an undrafted product from Toledo, but he's not – this isn't necessarily the guys you're looking at. You're looking at Harold Landry, who has 11 sacks on the season and has hit the quarterback 20 times. You're looking at Danico Autry, who has 6 sacks and 15 hits, and then Jeffrey Simmons, who's been one heck of a beast as well, 7.5 sacks, 14 times getting to the quarterback. Even even Ola himself, 2.5 sacks and 8 times. And if Bud comes back on the field, Dupree's been there for only 7 games so far. He has the lone sack and 6 times getting a quarterback, but we're familiar with how he can do that. The Steelers' offensive line has been a revolving door. They've had 5 different offensive guards this season playing at left guard. The 2 rookies have struggled with Kendrick Green at center, Dan Moore left tackle. So looking at the matchup across the field, it's going to be a little tough. And when you've got a ball hawk like Kevin Byard sitting back there in the secondary, I think the only maybe one thing you attack, the Sharks smell the blood in the water, is Jack Rabbit Jenkins. Don't call him Janoris Jenkins. Jack Rabbit Jenkins. He's been out. He was out last week. Doesn't look too promising this week as well, where we just got an update. Yeah, we got an update with Joe Hayden as well. Joe Hayden limited, so maybe some activity there. So at the same time, veteran cornerbacks on each side could be, what do you want to say, the weakest link in the chain here for both team secondaries.
Yeah, very much so. And the Titans right now, I mean, there's been games where they go and they get a guy off the squad, and that guy's going to play cornerback every single snap. You saw that with Greg Maben. Chris, when he's out there, he's been very consistent. He's been a guy that I've really watched. You can see the growth over the last 2 years that he's been in this program, and he's definitely a guy I would not try. If I am the Steelers, I would probably go the other side. Right now, it's just like injuries in the secondary. I mean, I know you mentioned Kevin Byard. He's definitely going to be out there making plays, but I'm just really curious to see like what the Titans are trying to do at corner. I wish I could give you guys. It has just been one of the stories with some of the position groups for the Titans this year. We just don't really know what we're going to see until Sunday actually gets here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, Sunday it is, one of the last 2 home games on the Steelers' schedule. They've got a full AFC slate here, so if they're looking for any type of playoff run, sitting at 6-1, it's got to start now. They still have the Ravens, Browns, and Chiefs on deck as well, and the Titans. So all of these games are going to factor in as all of these teams are still in the playoff hunt. Any closing thoughts that you have maybe on how you view this game in particular? I know if I was sitting in your seat, I'd probably feel a lot more confident about just mentioning, Autry, Simmons, Landry. If they could get to the quarterback, more than likely, if they collapse the offensive line, the Steelers may struggle to run the football, even though Najee Harris has been fairly dynamic as a player this year. I mean, the Steelers, they tend to not win the games where they aren't able to hand off the ball at least 20 times to Harris. So if they can't get the run game going and they just rely on Ben Roethlisberger, I don't feel as good sitting in my chair as far as this game. I guess the only thing that tends to favor the Steelers is that they're playing at home. But you got to see them put together some football that's consistent, because it's been anything such so far.
Yeah, right now, I am leaning towards the Titans ultimately coming out on top in this one. And it's been weird because, I mean, I'm trying to think of the last time the Steelers didn't have a winning record. And this season they could be that. And like you said, this is a pivotal matchup for them. They really do need to win this game to stay in that playoff. If I had to boil it down to 3 points, I've already talked about 2 of them. Whenever I look at one, just making sure that in the turnover battle, I know that's pretty cliche, but it's just like the Titans, whenever you look at their numbers and whenever they're having Ryan protect the ball, the team has just been so much more productive. And like with the Titans, because they usually play better against better competition. You go and you look at some of the losses that the team has had this year, they really do play down to their competition, excluding the Jaguars, because they've just had the Jaguars last several years. But the Texans were able to get a win against them. Titans just turned it over. They lost that turnover battle 4-0. The Jets were able to take advantage, and the Titans still had a chance to tie that game in overtime. But this is a team where, I mean, these 2 franchises have history with one another. My co-host, Denard Walker, played corner for the Titans back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And so he remembers the days whenever these two teams were constantly going at it, really hard-fought matchups. And right now is outside of turnovers and looking at making sure points are a premium. I think if you can get points, a game where I see a lot of guys going for it on 4th and goal, or I mean 4th down, if field goal. think it's going to be such a low-scoring game. I mean, take the under, right, would be my advice for both of these teams. But and then finally, it's just if you're the Titans, just come out and actually get something going early. Whenever they've stalled after the first couple of drives, it's really been a difficult game for. And so I think if they can get just the ball moving early, not necessarily even come away with points, even though you would like that as a fan. If you can show that you're able to move the ball on them, I think they'll be fine.
Well, Davey, thanks for joining us once again. I know a little bit of technical difficulties here on both of our ends. Don't know with like the wind blows sometimes and these things work the way they're going to want to work. So once again, Davey Hudson of the Believe in Titans podcast and a plethora of other places. Davey, if anyone wants to catch up with you or follow you, tell us how we could do so.
Thanks, Joe. I really do appreciate you having me on there. And yeah, you can follow our Instagram at Davey_Hudson. That's pretty much my handle across everything. And hopefully the Steelers, they can come on down to Nashville and a playoff spot here later on in January.
Yeah, I would love. Nashville's been on the bucket list for a while. Didn't get to go down there last year, and then there was like a preseason game where I said, I think it was like the week 4, when they still did 4 of them, and it was like a monsoon. And I looked at the weather forecast, said no way. But eventually, I'm going to check out everything Nashville has to offer, and maybe catch a game there as well. So sounds like fun. Thanks once again to Davey Hudson. Folks, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Got a number of, tumultuous schedule for ourselves, too, with the holidays coming up. So we'll try and keep you as informed as best as we can and get as many shows on deck as we can for you as well. So until next time, my name is Joe Kuzma, and as always, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.